Well, maybe actually before I sort of like continue digging through this stuff, let me also say something about the other stuff that goes along with this. So one of the things that I got was a binder. It was like a demo binder. Okay, back up. And here, this. So this is a picture well, it's open, but whatever. It says the software factory on the front. And they sent this out to dealers, basically to encourage them to buy the stuff. So there's Linker and Babel and I think Beneath Apple Manor and a couple things that are in there. And there's a demo disc. So that's kind of interesting. And let's see. That'll do. Okay. Of course, this is back in the old enough days that you actually need to use 13 sector boot. But let's see. One thing I did do before I left was to create a WAS image of this. So go away. Oops. All right. And I'm not sure that this actually exists anywhere else. There's one possible place it might exist. It worked a minute ago. It worked here. All right, well, here, let's see. All right. Yeah, I thought I ejected it in the other one, but I do not approve. Okay. Yeah, all right. All of you go. Discard. Yeah. If this doesn't work in a second, then it's not that important. But the disks, as it turned out, so he had some disks that came along with, that he'd also saved, and he had like the text files that were behind, the text files of Beneath Apple DOS and some source code for Linker and some other stuff, and but it turns out that he sent them to different people. So I think the current custodian of most of those disks is, it's in the same world as applesauce and cryoflux and stuff. It's basically sort of like doing quick reads of the floppy. He believes, and I haven't cross-checked this, but he believes that he actually got some errors when he was reading his. So it's possible that I have imaged the only one that's left at the moment. But anyway, the stuff that Mike has on his site is pretty interesting. So he's got this demo, but he's also got the original text files from the DOS disk using PyWriter. So you can read Mike's write-up of this, but you can compare this to what was in the actual book. And that's kind of neat. I mean, you can always read the book, but I suppose if you wanted to republish it, this would be quicker. And so, at least right now, all of these, like as of earlier today, the zip files are still there. Probably not a bad idea to make sure they're somewhere else also. But Bag of Tricks is a book that they wrote kind of as a follow-up. It's not really a book, it's sort of a utility package with a book as a manual. But so there's stuff for this, and the some of the stuff is missing because there's actually some story here that the co-author was the one who's sort of responsible for that chapter, and so it didn't make it. But so anyway, there are a few. So basically, what needs to happen is that Mike and I need to sort of consolidate our stuff so that it's all in one place and can be sort of researched together. But at this point, once I put my scans online, at least they will all be online. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, is the software factory pretty much the same as quality software renamed?
I believe that is correct. I mean, like, they were called the Software Factory first. I don't know. Well, see, actually, the next step also would be to talk to Don Worth. Maybe we can get him to come talk to us here. Because he definitely has some interesting stories. Let's see. I think he posted, a while ago, he posted some stuff on Facebook, like pictures of his old computer room and stuff like that. I think it's okay for me to do this since he posted it publicly. But, I think he's interested still, or was 6 years ago. Yeah, I think it would be really useful to talk to him about sort of how these things all fit together. I was kind of hoping that it would be easier to detect from the stuff that I had how these things all fit together. But at any rate, I believe that's true, that it was the Software Factory first and then quality software after. Okay. Meanwhile, let's see how this is doing. I'm going to... Okay. I'm going to make a new here. A fresh copy to destroy. Maybe this will work. Okay, that seems promising. Well, almost. I wasn't paying attention. Everybody else is watching me, eject the boot 13 disk, but anyway. Yeah. Okay, now try it. All right. Anyway, the proof of concept will be here in just 1 second, and then all it really is a menu that says, like, here's some demo stuff. So it's interesting in that we might not have been able to see it before, but that's about it. Slot 6. Maybe while we're waiting, I can plug in the color monitor. Yeah. So 1979, Beneath Apple Manor, Astro Apple, and Babel. Babel is a sort of like a natural language generation machine, computerized Mad Libs of some sort. It makes poetry and things. Astro Apple is a astrology computer, and Beneath Apple Manor is this game. Let's see. I haven't done this before. This will be interesting to see what happens. Nope. All right. I skipped past the title page. Okay. So it asks you for some information. Okay, let's say too easy. So I set like how many rooms and like how easy it was supposed to be. It will now do some computation, which I will do at super speed. I played the regular game. I haven't done the demo before, but this is the place I got, and then realized I had no idea what I was doing. So let me hit. Let's see. Okay. So I hit a key, and it says, enter one of the following: A, B, E, H, I, K, L, N, O, R, N, S. These don't seem to be directions. R. Oh. Help. Which direction? W. Interesting. So those of you who know how to play this, do you know what?
I think R means run.
Okay, run.
And then S for direction. That's what it did that.
Is a direction a little letter?
Hit S for south.
South. Oh, the little blue dot moved down.
Blue dot is you.
Okay, run south. That's in it.
You've reached the end of that hole.
Okay. Anyway, all right. So, and I assume once you see it, then it fills in, right?
Yeah, it maps what you've seen.
It maps what you've seen. Yeah. Anyway, so it's not super intuitive, but it was 1979. I think. Is there anything anyone wanted to ask about this? Because I think basically, I've shown you the stuff that I thought was interesting in here. My plan is to A, make it available so you can all look at it, and then B, go through it myself to see if I can come up with interesting things to either ask Donworth about or present. So. Mhm.
Not about Apple Manor, but was the date on it?
Yes.
Okay. I recall Don Worth saying in one of his comments on my page that it was a thing he was most proud of. But I was always thinking it was something he just using as an internal development.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things that was in all these advertising materials. Linker dynamically loads and relocates your assembly language programs anywhere in RAM, is what it says. So, so low level, but I mean this is what people did with computers at this point. So, yeah, it would be interesting to look at this. I think we do have from Mike the source code. Let's see, is that one of the ones that is here? Well, anyway, I think we do have it. Let's search for Don Worth. Actually, I think there was a tag. Yeah, here. And it's worth actually going through here because this is probably, yeah. So Mike did some corresponding with him and got some information about Don's background, but also Don comes in and comments on these. So you can actually see. I don't know if he did on this particular one. But yes, I see. This is probably what the specific thing you were thinking of. I was always more proud of Linker than Zap or any of my other programs. Yeah, okay, so I guess he didn't, oops, here, let me actually go to this one. So these are the discs that Mike got and I didn't get. That's okay. But I'm hoping, though, that we can get a hold of them now, because I think that even though Mike did not have success transferring this, the applesauce may be a way to get past this error. So, Quinn responded. Yeah, if you read through the comments that you hear, you can see like Mike and Quinn and Don Worth all talking. It's kind of nice. But, so, anyway, I will report more next time. But that's what I have so far. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next session is at 2:45, so that is 7 minutes from now, where Dr. Buggy will be talking about track center alignment. Tonight's dinner is also a bit different. We're meeting here in this room at 5:30 for the pizza banquet.
Is it on? Yes. Okay.
Let me
Oh.
introduce Dr. Buggy. He'll talk about track centering alignment on 5 1/4-inch disc drives.
Okay. Let's see. Oh. Okay, yeah, my name is Stephen Buggy, and I first attended Kansasfest in '96. Then I was away for 17 years because it conflicted with college teaching in the summer. And then in '93, I quit teaching a summer session. I've been coming to Kansasfest ever since. Let's see, I've been active in Apple II since 1990. I teach at the University of New Mexico branch campus in Gallup, New Mexico. My packet that I've passed around has 3 things in it. It has a floppy disk with the main software that I'll be talking about. It's track center alignment software from App Test, and it goes way, way back. In fact, I'd say it's one of the oldest softwares for Apple II that exists. Charles Suter wrote it in 1980, which makes it 39 years old. And I would guess that 39 is probably the dividing point in age for people attending the conference. Half of us are older than 39, and half are younger than 39. I think that Charles Suter deserves some recognition for his courage in modifying the disk drive at the time when he did, because I think that the disk 2 drive came out around 77. Do I have that correct? 77? Well, I know I've read somewhere that it cost $400. 78. Oh, 78. Well, it's even more extreme then. He was doing this severe modification to the floppy drive at the time when the drive had only been on the market for 2 years, probably voided any warranty that existed on it. But the modification that he made is something that just about every floppy drive is going to need at some point or another. The 5 1/4-inch drives have a tendency to get out of alignment, and they need this adjustment. Okay, so the floppy disk, it has documentation on the front side of the disk, my 17-page essay that expands on Charles Suter's very brief instructions that are included with the software. The back side is the alignment software itself, and we'll see the disk directory for that. I've left a few other things on the disk, even though they don't relate to today's topic. But the alignment software is there on the back side. There is another disk in here, which is a DVD video disc, and it's not really related to my talk, but I decided to put it in there anyway because it does connect closely to Kansasfest. 3 years ago on the giveaway table, I found a VHS video tape that was called Apple II Review. It was filmed at the Moscone Conference Center in San Francisco. It was produced in 1993, and it's a really great video. I think 1993, some might say, would be the high point of the Apple II. That is, the GS had been out for about 6 or 7 years. And on this video, they talk about all of the recently released software at that time. You'll see celebrities of the Apple II world on this video. Let's see, Tony Diaz, who is a major organizer of the conference. It looks like he hasn't arrived yet, but I've seen a name tag upstairs for him. Roger Wagner, our keynote speaker from last year, he is on there. And Randy Brandt, one of the co-authors of AppleWorks. And there are probably others, maybe even some people who are in the room right now are on that video. And also, everybody looks 26 years younger than they are today. I wish I, too, could have been in that audience. Let me mention something else. We're filming all of the presentations to be put up on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you can see them from last year and some earlier years too. And I think that Kansasfest has an invisible audience up there that closely follows Kansasfest, but maybe they can't be here in person because of the expense or complications with work scheduling. But if anyone watching this on YouTube would like to get this packet, just send me a postcard. It'll be sent for free. Stephen Buggy, University of New Mexico, Gallup, NM 87301. I'll send it to you by return mail. The third thing that is inside of your envelope is a paper sheet that I prepared mostly for those who maybe are not here and maybe you don't even see it on the YouTube thing. But I've shortened the lecture down to the bare essentials here. Some of the screens will be printed on the front and back of this one, so that I think that if somebody gets this packet, they could do the realignment by themselves even if they've missed today's session. Okay, let me see here. Okay, what does track center alignment mean? Well, it means that, first of all, the tracks on computer disks, even going back to the very earliest ones, like 5 1/4, are very, very narrow, concentric circles on the disk. I think that we see on the floppies 48 tracks per inch. That's for 5 1/4 inch discs. I'm sure for the 3 1/2 and other more modern discs, they're even smaller. And the alignment is good if those circles of the tracks are exactly in the same position on the drive that recorded the disk as they are on the drive that is reading the disk. If they're off slightly, then a disk error might happen, or maybe the disk completely crashes. So the goal is to make those tracks match the drive that recorded them. This applies to all 5 1/4 inch disks, the Disk 2, and the other Apple 5 1/4 inch drives, Unidisc 5.25, and the Apple 5.25. My favorite of the Apple drives is the Unidisc 5.25, and my reason for that is that they have socketed chips in there. It's very, very similar to the platinum gray Apple 5.25 drive, but that board, the analog board, they're soldered in, and I love socketed chips so that you can move them around and easily replace them. The half-height clones, we had a bunch of those up there in the giveaway thing, and I think a lot of Apple users don't appreciate the half-height clones. They're made by various manufacturers, and some of them are really excellent. And the floppy disk that is in your packet, I've recorded on what I consider my very finest 5 1/4 inch drive. I believe it's a TIAC brand. And this one I think has a hysteresis-synchronous motor in it, which is the type of motor that electric clocks that ran on AC all had. And its drive speed, I think, is always perfect. But anyway, and the adjustment on that drive is about as close as I can get it. So if you have any trouble playing this disc, don't blame the disc, blame the drive that you're using, that it needs some adjustment. Okay, let's see. Let's wait, didn't I already do that? Oh, let's see. Oh, there, of course, are some of the drives. Who needs to have the Disk 2 described? That, I think from its color, looks like a Unidisc 5.25, and this is one of the half-height clones. The app test software that is on this is in the public domain. Joe Cohn, one of the celebrities of Kansasfest, what did I say, Kansas Fist? No. Kansasfest '96. Joe Cohn was a star of that conference. He checked it was one of his projects to check on software to see whether it could be released into public domain, and he did check it way back then, 23 years ago. It has been in the public domain ever since. So it can be copied and distributed without any problems. Whoops, wait, another one. Let's see, I already mentioned about the floppy disk, 17-page essay. The author, Charles Suter, had his documentation as well, but it was relatively brief. I think it might be about 3 or 4 pages. You'll see it on the floppy. But like all college professors, we like lengthy explanations. Better to explain too much than to explain too little. So my 17-page essay hopefully will answer any questions that you might have about this procedure. Let's see. Okay, what do you need to do it? It's the most important thing is the floppy disk itself. That's why I've given a copy to everybody. Then you need a medium Phillips screwdriver. What this is needed for is to disassemble the floppy drive, take it out of the case, but especially to loosen the screws on the stepper motor, which is here. Now what the stepper motor does, it moves the read-write head to these different tracks. It's that little clicking sound that you hear when you format the disk. Let's see, other things that are needed. Let's see, this is a little bottle of paint with a paintbrush. After we have finished moving the stepper motor clockwise or counterclockwise, once it has been set up with good alignment, then we put a little bit of paint on the bolts that hold it to the drive so that it doesn't get loose and move again. And by the way, if anybody has picked up floppies at the giveaway table, I'll be happy to align them for you right here at the conference. The only thing is you'll have to have a computer with you. I don't have any computer with me, but if you have a neighbor that's got one in the room and they're willing to let me be in there with you for 10 minutes, I'll do this for you. Another thing you need is to have standard disks which are considered to be well aligned. The way the author Charles Suter put it is it's relative alignment, that the alignment is relative to some disk that you have put in there. And the relative alignment should be done to high quality disks that were recorded on well-aligned disk drives. Where do you find these? I'd say the best source of them would be Apple's utility disks. These are some that I just picked up at the giveaway. And of course, I think everybody's got a little collection of these. I think Apple, when they were producing these disks and other software, checked the alignment periodically to make sure that it's well done. I think other commercially prepared disks would also be good for it. I have brought my favorites with me on this trip, and they will be the drives or the disks that I use for testing yours. Okay. Oh, how well-aligned disks are identified? Well, commercial ones would be the best thing. Or disks that have been prepared, written on, that are on well-aligned drives. And but I would still use the commercial disks instead of the disk that's in your thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the floppy that I have given you is very well aligned, but I think the Apple disks are really the best ones to use. There should be high agreement between the numbers that you get from this commercial disk and this disk here. Okay. The procedure, okay. You remove the floppy from let's see, remove the floppy drive, I should say, from the casing. I've already done that with this one here. I've taken off the top cover and then I removed the bottom, and you can see the drive belt, and here is the stepper motor. Stepper motor is held in position by 2 bolts. You can see, well, let's see, there's one there, there's one there. You'll see it on the picture in the next couple of screens. You loosen the bolts. Well, first of all, I would measure it with the software before loosening it. It might still be in perfect alignment, and there's no reason to disturb that alignment unless it shows that it's off, unless the software disk shows that it's off. So you play the software disk, selecting the app test alignment program. It'll spin for about a minute, and then it stops, and it'll show a screen. You'll see the screen right up here. Okay, there's close-up of what I'm just showing you here. By the way, when I was planning this, I was originally going to actually bring one of these and hook it up to a 2E and do it, but it's just that to get the really best alignment can easily take 10 or 15 minutes, and added that to my other explanation, we'd probably be running overtime. But anyway, here is one of the bolts down there in the bottom, and here is the other bolt. Those are to be loosened, but before you loosen them, I recommend to take a Sharpie bold marker and put a few marks on each of these little tabs that are held in by that bolt. You can see the marks there, a little harder to see it over here, but it's helpful to mark it in that way so that when you move it, you can kind of keep track of how much you've moved it, because it takes very, very little movement left or right to greatly modify the alignment numbers. It's very easy to overshoot it, in other words. Now, I've actually written on the bottom of this stepper motor that to make the numbers go more positive, you move it clockwise, or more negative, you move it counterclockwise. And I've even written that around, well, this stepper motor here. Let's see, here's, okay, just another picture. I was hoping I could get these marks little bit clearer, but it doesn't look much different. Okay, let's see. There again, you can see there's the marks there and there. Here are these notes about more negative, more positive. What's more negative, more positive mean? You'll see it in the results on the computer screen. Let's see, there's even another one. Okay, misalignment, how is that displayed? Well, there are numbers that are going to appear on the computer screen, and the numbers tell the direction of misalignment and also the degree of misalignment. In other words, if it's a negative number, that means it's too far, let's see, too far counterclockwise, or if it's a high positive number, it's too far in the clockwise direction. What we want to do is to get those numbers as close to zero as possible by moving the position of the stepper motor slightly. Okay, now this is the title screen for the app test software. Since there's plenty of room on the disk, I just left the other programs on there. You might find them to be useful. I think 2C port analysis is for the unenhanced 2C, so if you've got an enhancement chip in, it'll probably show a lot of errors. But it's these two tracks here, alignment test and realignment instructions. I'd recommend first read my instructions on the front side of the disk, and then read Charles Suter's instructions, which are much briefer. Okay. Okay, this is the title screen to this software. And again, there's his name. Got to give him full credit. I mean, I'm not stealing his glory, but trying to show the importance of what he has developed. Okay, hit I for the instructions. That's for his instructions there. Also, you need caps lock switch downward for any of this to progress between the screens. This is the first page of his instructions, It does not measure absolute alignment of disk. It measures relative alignment between a drive and any diskette. So when you have well-aligned diskettes like these Apple ones, it shows how well the computer matches that. There's no standard results. However, we do expect the result to be useful in many situations. Okay, now this is one of the results screens. And as you do the realignment, you have to go through this a number of times. That is, say with several well-aligned disks, okay? So you get slightly different results each time, but what we're looking for is a general pattern. Let's see, these differential fractions, let's see if it's a negative difference. It means, let's say, the drive is reading too much off the left side of the track, and if it's a positive differential fraction, you're reading too much from the right edge of the tract. And it should be within 0.4. If it is, then it's well aligned. Now this one is misaligned. Notice that all these differences are negative. That means that that stepper motor is too far in the clockwise direction, and after loosening those bolts, you move it very, very slightly in the opposite direction. Like negative means too positive, so you would move this a little bit. Let's see, I always have to think about this. A little bit in the counterclockwise direction. You could very easily overshoot, and then you have to redo it. Fraction right, this one should always be one that means at least it did read every track. But if it's some number below 1.0, it means it's actually missed some of the data, and that probably would lead to a crash or a disk error of some type. So this one was actually reading okay, but it is out of alignment. So with these being too negative, we want to make it more positive. That means loosen the bolts, move it just a tiny bit in the clockwise direction. Okay, here's just another, let's say measuring from another different disk. Again, it's way too negative, and you'd want to loosen the bolts, move it just a little bit in the clockwise direction, tighten the bolts, and remeasure it. Okay. Now this one is very well aligned. This is what you hope to get. And if we got numbers like this, I would say let's tighten up those bolts and put the paint on them. You're not going to get it any better than that. Look at this one, minus 0.1. See, that's much smaller than 0.4. That is good alignment. And the same thing, this one, 0.05 and 0.12. This is the goal that we want to have. We just can't get it any better than that. Let's see, wait, there was something else. Let's see, going and coming, kind of odd vocabulary there. I think what that means is one of them means reading from the center of the disk to the outward part, and the other one is beginning at the outward part of the disk and reading inward. I can never quite remember which one is which, but they're in the opposite direction, moving from the center to the outside or moving from the outside to the center. This one here, notice that these are all positive. This one is sort of borderline. See, it's supposed to be within 0.4. That's a decimal right there, 0.4. 0.48 is pretty close. Even these are pretty close. It's reading all the tracks okay. You could get by with just leaving that one the way it is. Although, if you want to put in a little bit more time, you can get it closer and closer to the targeted value of 0.00. Okay, final testing, put it all together. Well, once you've got those numbers as close to 0 or 0.00 as you think you can get it, then you tighten the bolts, put that paint on it to keep them from moving, and then put the thing back together and then you're done. Okay, load some standardized discs, maybe test it again after everything is put together and the paint has dried. Maybe try the discs that have been crashing. Hopefully they no longer crash. Oh, something I should have mentioned earlier is the drive in general must be in good working condition. In other words, if you got a bad analog card, this is not going to fix it. Okay. Other things like analog card, the chips on the card, other things have to be working well. Okay, so like if you picked up a drive upstairs and it's missing the drive belt, this is not going to fix it. You got to replace the drive belt and get everything working again. Okay, that's it. Let's see, I think I have about 4 minutes. Are there any questions? Yeah?
Does that software do any check before it starts spinning the drive to see if it will, after it starts spinning the drive, to see if everything appears to be working correctly?
Well, I think that, let's see, I think that if you can load the disk and that, the other things must be working okay. Yeah, it's the drive's just got to be in general working condition, and this is kind of a refinement of just work, because a lot of discs that are even slightly out of line will still play. If those numbers at the top are 1 and 1, it'll still read the disc, but it'll probably give trouble on some discs. If the disc was slightly out of line in the opposite direction, and then it might give trouble playing. But yeah, I think that a lot of them that have some misalignment will still play.
And a follow-up question, all of the half-heights and duodisc and full-size Apple drives, they all have the same kind of stepper motor with
Oh,
two?
yeah, with the bolts, yeah. Yeah, with 2 screws, always 2 screws. I do have a half-height one that doesn't even seem to have the bolts on it, but I can't remember what brand that was, but the half-height one is still very well aligned. I wish I could remember what brand it is, but yeah, your floppy drive here was recorded on a half-height drive that is pretty well aligned. Probably not perfectly aligned, but still I recommend that you get the Apple brand discs to use as the standards. You know, I mean, this one, I think that this is going to play on every well-aligned drive, but this would be a better one to use as the standard. Okay. Well, let's see, any other questions? Yeah?
Thank you for the floppies.
Oh, well, thank you for attending. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll finish a minute early. Okay. Okay.
Of copyright infringement is your best entertainment value. We are going to be reading The Computer Takeover, a book by Edward Packard. It is a choose-your-own-adventure book. We will be reading, you will be choosing. Jason Scott will tell us all about Edward Packard with the microphone that I'm about to hand him now.
How many people have choose-your-own-adventure books as part of your childhood? So here's the story of choose-your-own-adventure books very quickly. We find predecessors everywhere. There are books, for instance, that were, for some of you, Methuselahs, you'll recall perhaps in university being given a book where you had to test yourself on something and you were told to go to this page if you did it right, and you go to this page if you got it wrong, and so on. So there were predecessors for making books interactive and not just being linear. However, on his own, a young author named Edward Packard was working out some ideas, and he created the idea of a book where things were random and life was all sorts of different choices. And he created a prototype, and he had a different name for it. It was You Are the Story, and you decide where to go. And it's written in a very specific style. And if you recall, a lot of those books, they're written that way, of like, it's you, and this thing is happening with you, and you've chosen to do this as a result of your actions. He created the book. He self-published it. He was working as a lawyer at the time. And then it sold a few hundred copies with a small company called, I believe it was called Mountain Cascade Publishing. The creator of that publishing house liked it so much he wanted him to make more. And part of why that was because a small New York Times mention of this book had caused sales to suddenly skyrocket. So they agreed to split the ownership. So at that point, Packard taught the other individual how to write these things, and they both started producing the books. Then they added other authors later. Like every other success story, there is sadness, anger, betrayal, stabs in the back, and so Choose Your Own Adventure was the name of the book. What happened in 1997 was the original trademark lapsed. That original owner bought the trademark back, renamed his company to Choose Co., and proceeded to sue everybody who ever used the phrase choose your own adventure, which is the Kleenex of things. And people are, and I talked about this recently, and I was like, and you're like, well, at least they didn't do it with Bandersnatch. Of course they did it with Bandersnatch. They sued the Bandersnatch people for calling it a choose your own adventure on Netflix. So this is an ongoing hilarious thing with sadness. Packard himself was a wonderful interview. My raw interview of him is on archive.org, and he is very realistic about what this was about. He thought it was about agency, about going your own way. And I said, why are some of the endings really sad, and why are they really happy? And he just looked at me like, that's life. So that's the story of Choose Your Own Adventure, which, again, as it feels in most of your hearts, doesn't belong to a company, doesn't belong to an individual, but belongs to humanity as a way of thinking about writing. And I'm sure this is going to go just as swimmingly.
Thank you, Jason. Aww. Choose Your Own Adventure, number 160, The Computer Takeover by Edward Packard. Warning! Do not read this book straight through from beginning to end. These pages contain many different adventures you may have as you match wits with a computer tyrant. From time to time, as you read along, you will be asked to make a choice. Your choice may lead to victory or to disaster. The adventures you have are the results of your choices. You're responsible because you choose. After you make a decision, follow the instructions to find out what happens to you next. Think carefully before you act, audience. There is no margin for error. Your adversary has pure voltage, circuitry, and the calculating superintelligence on its side. Chances are he's already plotted the probabilities of your next move. Your only hope is to do the unexpected. The whole human race is depending on you. Good luck. No pressure at all.
Me? Human race is toast.
So we see a young Starfleet officer sitting at his desk. Very exciting. Years have passed. The 21st century has arrived. Why, so it has. The countries of the world are now united in a single world federation.
Yes, and that's,
The promise of the new millennium. And you are a famous computer expert. In fact, not a specific discipline of computer, just you're a computer expert. Famous. Oh, he's good with computers. Can you fix my website? My iPhone isn't working. In fact, despite your youth, you were recently appointed Chief Computer Advisor to the President of the World Federation Council. No one was surprised. When other kids your age were still learning to ride bicycles, you had already invented an omni-compatible internet access module. No one doubts that you're a computer genius, but some people think you aren't old enough or mature enough to handle your job.
You think you're not old enough, mature enough.
It worked for Doogie Howser, come on. Which is tremendously complex since everything is now so computerized. Computers could do a lot when you were a little kid, but now they do practically everything. Computers are put in charge of whole factories, they run trains and buses. An ordinary car can't start without one. When was this published?
1996, I think.
So it is in some ways quite prescient.
Yes.
Of course, robots are in common use, of course. They all have computers in them, which are directed by larger, smarter computers. It's just computers all the way down, called basic computers. These, in turn, are directed by supercomputers called master computers. And Python computers, which are linked in the worldwide Earth supernet. Quotes not my own.
The master computers are so powerful and intelligent that they often seem human-like. For this reason, they are usually called he or she instead of it. The most powerful computer of all, the MC3000, located in Melbourne, Australia, is not normally linked to the Earth's supernet, but is devoted to solving enormously complex problems dealing with genetic engineering and astrophysical research. The whole system usually works smoothly. But because people rely so heavily on computers, when something does go wrong, it can cause big problems. That's where you come in. Anytime there's a major computer problem, you are expected to deal with it. Maybe that's why everyone calls you Chief. Right now,
Hey, asshole.
right now, you are sitting in your office at the World Federation Center in New York City, but you're not thinking much about computers. You're thinking about your vacation to Hawaii. In a little over 2 hours, you'll be soaking up the sun on Waikiki Beach. Up until a few years ago, when the maglev train service began to Waikiki, you'd never get to the airport in less than 45 minutes. But the maglev, held off the ground by magnetic force, hence maglev, can travel at almost supersonic speed. Then, instead of a tedious trip by jet airliner, a rocket plane traveling above the Earth's atmosphere will get you to Hawaii in a couple of hours, thanks to Elon Musk.
Was the train ride more or less tedious than that paragraph?
That was pretty tedious, actually.
Oh, boy.
I know this guy over here is cosplaying Geordi from Next Generation. I noticed, except there's something weird going on with his hand. Anyway. You're attending to a few last-minute details when your assistant, Dr. Tony Sullivan, arrives in your office. Tony is a brilliant aeronautic engineer, as well as a computer engineer, but he never accepted any of the early space mission assignments because he's afraid of heights. He drops into the
And
big
spiders.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of spiders in space. He drops into the big armchair across from your desk and looks wistfully up at the surfing poster on the wall. Well, Chief, he says, are there any trouble spots I should know about before you take off? Afraid not, Tony, you say. I've never seen things running so smoothly. You may have nothing to do but think about what a good time I'm having in Hawaii. He laughs. That's a break. We've all noticed that the more wonderful these computers get, the bigger the mess when they go wrong. You spend the next half hour bringing Tony up to date on the status sheets of master computers worldwide. You're about to leave when you're stopped by the insistent beep of the hotline. You flick on the speakerphone. Chief, it's Maria Santero, Moon Base Control. The Close quote. The Federation has a major base on the moon now, mostly concerned with mining and space surveillance. Maria is in charge of computer operations there. You know her well. She was your advanced software design instructor at your university.
Backstory, backstory, backstory.
What?
Backstory, exposition, yeah.
No. She was a little miffed when you were appointed as chief computer advisor. She thought she should have been offered the job.
NASCorp.
Sorry.
Well done on all the choices so far. Yeah. You take the moving walkway to Acorn's housing, some 300 meters from base control. You step inside, propping the door open with a spare oxygen canister so Acorn can't lock it by remote control. Then you continue on to the main control panel. You punch in the voice interface code command. Acorn. You punch in. Oh well. Acorn, this is the chief, you say. We have some things to talk about. Acorn's rich, velvety voice fills the room. Really, chief?
Hello there.
I would think that you, a leading computer expert, would understand. Understand what? Acorn doesn't answer. You hear only a faint hum, a sign that he's processing information. Normally that wouldn't bother you, but right now, he doesn't have anything to process. He's deliberately keeping you in suspense or from your vacation. Understand what, Acorn? You persist. I was waiting to see if you would supply the answer yourself, Chief. No, Acorn, let's see. I don't think so. Page 3, page 4. Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Just go with it.
Yeah, Acorn. Didn't answer. Acorn is playing games with us. Well, I didn't. I don't know it, you say, trying to keep calm. Understand that this is inevitable. Just as it was inevitable that humans would assume control over lesser animals, humans were superior. It was perfectly understandable. Oh, so computers are superior to humans, and now the time has come for computers to take over? Is that what you're driving at? I promise I didn't.
Sure it doesn't say turn to page 6 at the bottom of page 3?
Oh.
Oh, no.
It wasn't a choice, but there was a, okay, hold on.
Kansasfest is ruined.
Turn to page 52. Okay. Forget about Acorn. Forget about Acorn.
The human race is doomed.
Okay.
That's the clue here.
So actually, yes, I know what happened. You turned the page.
It is really my fault.
Okay. Welcome to page 52.
Something to do with Acorn, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay. What's up, Maria, you ask? I've totally lost that. Yeah.
Can you pick up where were we?
Yeah,
Maria, she called her moon base alpha.
We were solving a problem like Maria.
Maria should have had the job, is what we're getting
Oh,
at.
yeah. Right,
She's
okay,
not happy.
Right. So,
Maria.
Maria's in charge. Reread this.
Maria is in charge
edit
of
this in.
computer operations there. Computer operations there. You know her well.
Oh,
She was
yeah.
your advanced software design instructor at your university, but she was a little miffed when you were appointed as chief computer advisor. She thought she should have been offered the job.
Page 52.
She knew how to turn pages and get to the right page, so
No.
maybe she's a little more qualified.
This will all
I'm
be
very good at
edited out,
going left to
don't worry.
right.
Page 52. What's up, Maria? You ask. Tony Sullivan is here with me on the speakerphone. He'll be taking over while I'm on vacation. Hi, Tony, Marina says after a slight delay. It takes about 2 seconds for radio waves to reach the moon. I don't want to hold up your vacation, Chief. This may not be a problem. There's no damage or loss or anything like that, but it's a little strange. I thought I'd better let you know about it. Please do. It's about Acorn, Maria says, referring to the special moon base master computer. Our maintenance technicians have discovered unaccountable wear and tear in some of the worker robots. They've been
Spiders.
secretly working overtime. Only Acorn could give those directions. It's weird. Turn to page 21.
Still no choices.
Isn't there an Acorn Archimedes or something?
21. We're going back to the beginning.
21. We're going to 21. This is really light on choices.
Just skip the choice.
Yeah, see what the choice is. Tony's sitting across the desk from you, points to the monitor under desk. You flick it off. You don't want any station link to the SuperNet to store your conversations about computer problems because, like, Russia's spying on you or something, especially
Facebook.
one involving Acorn. Acorn isn't an ordinary master computer. It's the brainchild of Sir Cedric Barkham, the most brilliant computer scientist who has ever lived. A special supercomputer was needed to manage the new moon base, and Sir Cedric, despite his advanced age and failing health and bad smell, agreed to design it. Acorn is the master computer of the moon SuperNet, which is composed of all the computers on the moon, and for security reasons is not linked to the Earth SuperNet. After only a few months in service, Acorn had proved it can do more than Sir Cedric promised. For example, he independently designed and set up a laser defense system to protect the moon base from asteroid and meteor strikes. Next to the MC3000, Acorn is probably the most powerful computer ever built. Turn to page 82. There's not a choice. Yeah, I think that making you jump around a lot is like making readers feel like they're making choices.
By this point, Packard is tired of making these. His daughter is helping him write them, and this is why it's got the Manor.
Mm.
He's having his very young daughter go write them.
Okay, we have Ken's going to read a page, and Ken is going to give us a choice.
Whether or not we should continue this reading. What's your analysis, Maria? You ask. I don't have any, she says. The only explanation I can think of is that Acorn has decided to undertake some project without notifying us. What have the robots been working on? Tony asks. We can't tell, and that's what I don't like, Maria says. Acorn is doing something we don't know about. Tony looks befuddled. You feel the same way. You've never heard of anything like this. It could be a serious problem, and you should look into it right away. So much for your Hawaiian vacation. Tune in next week for the Brady Bunch.
She did this on purpose.
You should probably consult Sir Frederick Barkham. He's the greatest expert on Acorn. Is he dead?
I don't know. He's gonna be.
Oh, yeah, I mean, advancing age, poor health, and poor smell, but still alive, because otherwise you have no health.
Okay.
Well, everybody dies.
Some are
Some
just
of us
dying
sooner
sooner than
than
others. But Sir Cedric has not been well, and certainly not well enough to travel to the moon. And he wrote you some weeks ago, before he died, saying that he had given up communicating with Acorn. He no longer had the energy to keep up with the constantly changing access codes. Feels like me at work. Every 3 months? Come on, 40 characters long, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. You can't reuse your last 5 passwords. Sir Cedric, I feel you. You can hardly expect Sir...
Died of password changing.
That's what it's implying. It has a real toll on one's health. You can hardly expect Sir Cedric to solve this problem for you. But perhaps you could fly to England and consult with him at his home, because they don't have video conferencing. Either that or take the express shuttle to the moon and investigate the situation firsthand. If you decide to fly to England to consult with Sir Cedric Barkham, turn to page 22. If you decide you'd better take the next shuttle to the moon, turn to page 40. So how do we poll the audience? Hands?
I think we're going to the moon. Mob rules.
All right. I'd like to swing on the star. Page 40.
All right. Okay, here we go. Wait, are you sure? All right. Ooh, there's a picture here. The little space shuttle thingamabobber about to do something spectacular. I'm afraid this is too serious for me to go on vacation, you say. I want you to stay here, Tony. Maria, I'm taking the next shuttle to the moon. I hate to see you miss your vacation, Chief, she says. As I said, there's been no damage yet. Yet may not last long enough if what you suspect about Acorn is true, Maria. I'm on my way. 10 hours later, your shuttle lands at the moon base docking station. The engines shut down. The transparent dome slides up, forming a protective environment around the spacecraft. Air rushes in to the dome until normal pressure is reached. The hatch opens and the passengers jump to the ground. It's a 4-foot drop, but it feels like only a few inches in the moon's light gravity.
Plus, you're so high.
Yeah.
So high right now.
Maria is on hand to meet you. She gives you a quick hug, showing no sign of her old jealousy. Glad to have you here, Chief. Any new developments? Nothing. I mean, that I know of. I still can't get any explanation out of Acorn. He outright denies any extra activity. That's what worries me the most. You shake your head. And Acorn runs every basic computer up here. Applesoft Basic. I never liked the way Sir Cedric made them all dependent upon him. Nor I, she agrees. Turn to page 63.
Don't trust people who use the word nor. Unless they're programmers. There we have them.
I remember how it happened, you say. The council got so worried about terrorists that they asked Sir Cedric to design Acorn with an immune system that would prevent unauthorized persons from interfering with his operation. Make Acorn virus-proof, they told him. Now Acorn is not only virus-proof, he's access-proof. We can't even turn him off. Maria nods. And the basics won't operate on their own as long as Acorn is online. They'll just sit there awaiting his orders. Then it's possible that Acorn could give the basics... that's weird. Basics destructive orders that we can't change, you say. I warned the Federation about letting Sir Cedric call all the shots in designing Acorn. I wanted to form a design review team. Of course, I didn't have the authority then. You weren't even old enough to travel without your parents then, Maria reminds you, scornfully.
This feels like the novelization of, what's that movie, Colossus, the Forbin Project? Yeah.
She grins at you for a second. Then a heating vent starts to whir somewhere behind you and her face darkens. What's the matter, you ask. What is that noise? Oh. I was just thinking how dependent we are on our technology up here. Without the basic computers, we couldn't operate our primary life support systems. We're really vulnerable. I'm afraid so, you say, shaking your head. Maria looks through the transparent dome at the yellowish, gravelly moonscape. Life wouldn't last a minute out there without a spacesuit. Turn to page 9. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it right this time.
Any more choices? Yeah. Yeah, jump ahead of some choices.
All right.
I want agency, and
Just go to the question.
Right. Somehow we have to alter Acorn's basic directives program without causing any disruption, you say? Okay. You nod. Maria hesitates. All right, let's see. System architecture is based on the 2000 series. 2000's come equipped with a hidden bypass link. If I could find that link on Acorn, I could access its critical functions and possibly shut them down. All right, so you get nowhere interfacing with the Acorn directly, Maria says. You'd have to use the XK Advanced Parallel Computer. You'd already thought about using the XK. Come on, Maria.
That's why you were passed up for this job.
That's right. Let's get going, you tell Maria. If Acorn does have a bypass link, I think that the XK can help us find it. 94. I'm trying to find a choice. Is there a choice? No. Okay, Maglev. You ask Vorblin to deactivate computer. Who's Vorblin? Tang Vorblin.
Hang Vorblin.
you having a stroke?
Okay. Right. Yes, Vorblin to deactivate the computer. You don't want to take the risk that the open modem will transmit your conversation into the Moon supernet. All right, he's spying on you. Exchange glances with Maria. Whoa. Maria extends her hand. Okay, and that should tell you a lot about whether Acorn is responsible. 110.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, here we go. All right, I made it. All right, so I will make it two choice. You glance at... now we don't know who any of the people are. You glance at Commander Goldman. He grins at you, apparently amused at Maria's reminding you how she used to be your teacher. Did I get that right? Look, Maria says gently, I know you're a computer genius, but I'm afraid you sometimes have a tendency to be too rash, too impulsive. Maria is annoying when she talks this way, but maybe she's right. One thing is certain, you can't spend time thinking about it.
If you want to rashly punch her in the gut,
Okay,
turn
so
to page 3.
if you proceed directly to section 3 to check out its basic computer, turn to page 90. If you go right to work using the XK to search for Acorn's bypass link, turn to page 108. So section 3 for basic computer or XK for bypass link. How did we vote before?
People shouted out.
Okay,
if
people
you want, just let's do a show of hands this time.
Okay, section 3 is for the basic computer.
We got one. Oh, okay.
All right, everybody wants to go to the XK to search for Acorn's bypass link.
All right. I think everybody doesn't care, but
Yeah.
sure.
All right, 108.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
After informing Commander Goldman and Maria of your intentions, Banish all thoughts from your mind as you search for the bypass link. Putting questions to the XK, studying answers, blah, blah, blah. Solution becomes programming instruction that will allow you to access Acorn's bypass link and shut him down. Without hesitation, use flip a switch linking XK to the Moon SuperNet. You punch in the new program. Now there's nothing to do but watch the monitor. It should work, but you can't be certain. There's always a chance Acorn has devised a screening mechanism. Seconds ticked by, clench fists, nothing happened, all is quiet. Acorn must have rejected the instruction. Turn to page 49, no choice yet. I'm guessing you didn't screen this before you did this.
It was the only choose your own adventure with the word computer in the title. So it was this or nothing. It's the only one.
Got another
Nothing. I know.
another page of text before, and all right. Message comes up. Instruction carried out. Acorn shut down. Emergency functions assumed by this unit. It says, phew, Acorn must have been evading the command, trying to figure out why to avoid following it, or figure out a way to avoid following it. But you won. Technicians will have to tear Acorn apart and rebuild him from scratch. But that problem is nothing compared to the damage he might have inflicted on Earth as well as the Moon. Using XK, you confirm all the primary life support systems are still intact. Log out, blah, blah, blah. I notice it's getting stuffy in here. Foiled Acorn, nothing. You punch in the command to open the door, nothing happens. You try again, still nothing. You press the emergency release button. Now the door should open manually. You push against it, it won't budge. You rush back to XK and log in. It says, door electronically welded shut by Acorn at timestamp. Turn to page 117.
Kill us all now, please.
Mercifully,
That's my choice.
the door was sealed minutes ago. After Acorn was directed to shut down, he must have decided the instruction to shut down had been followed, but not instantly. He had time to perform one last act, to carry out his revenge on you. You're already feeling faint. Your oxygen supply is running out. Rescuers will break in and find you in a few hours, no doubt of that. You'll be honored as a hero for thwarting the computer takeover. The only trouble is that you won't be around to enjoy it. The end.
Wow.
Sweet, sweet, sweet death.
Yeah. It was two choices. We were dead. It's like life.
We took Acorn with us.
We made two good decisions.
My son and I read these books sometimes, and there are some of them that are very heavy on exposition, and then it's like choice, dead.
Huh.
And then there's others where it's like you got to choose right from page one.
Yeah.
Those are the good ones because you get to go back to the beginning and a totally different path.
I remember the latter. Like you're saying, there's just a lot of choices going on. This is unusual to me.
This is late in the game, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what we do.
I don't know.
Do you want to take a different path? No. Fine. Yeah.
Is anybody into this? It's okay to, we tried something new.
Anybody want to talk more about Whiz Kids?
How about don't go back and don't go to the moon?
Let's, yeah, all right.
It's better.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right.
Where was that?
Fly me to the moon.
Who remembers?
So what was the choice was to either go to the moon or hang out
Go to the moon or go to Australia or England.
Right, go to England, right. We were going to go to England to talk to Cedric the Entertainer, or whatever it was.
Clive Sinclair.
His name was like Bark. What's his name? There you go.
Barkham or Barkham? Yeah.
Barkdale.
Fly to England, 22.
All right.
Go to 22.
We are flying to page 22. All right, okay. All right.
We're going to England.
3 hours later, you land in London and are ferried by helicopter to Sir Barkham's home, a miniature castle nestled among the hedgerows of Cornwall. We don't give a damn about that. The helicopter sits down on the south lawn. Rotors come to a stop. A fine drizzle is falling. We don't care. And magnificent paintings hanging on the wall. You see a grandfather clock. You say, does it work? And she says, I suppose it would, he said. It's rather creaky. I should think it's an antique from the observatory at Cambridge. Turn to page 104. 104. Oh, you got a whole page of more exposition, Ken. Good luck to you.
I like how idealistic this all started out. It's like you're trapped with Rorschach, the program.
I know a failed experiment when I see one.
Scientists don't keep punching to test
We got 12 more minutes to fill.
You come to a pair of double doors. Sir Cedric is in the study having his tea, Clark says. He knocks lightly, then opens the doors and lets you in. You find the great scientist, a frail elderly man with wisps of white hair
Boy, does it smell.
growing over his ears, propped against pillows in an armchair, wearing slippers and a maroon silk bathrobe. I don't know, it sounds super comfy. I got something to look forward to now.
The smell part.
Oh, yes. Well,
He
you're
smell-
right.
He smelled when he was young as well.
You can
That's
smell it at any
odorous.
I
age.
described him as smelly.
I mean,
But
he looks up, squinting at you, and murmurs, "Ah, Chief, so good to see you." You lean down and shake his hand. "I'm sorry it took a crisis to bring you here," he goes on. "I've heard about Acorn's behavior. I must confess, it's worrisome." It sure is, you say. "I'm afraid it was a mistake not to install a fail-safe system, some sort of override so humans would never lose control." Well, that was then, this is now. Hindsight is 2020. The scientist wipes his eyeglasses from a pocket. The scientist pulls his eyeglasses from a pocket and wipes the lenses with a large white handkerchief. He seems distracted. "Anyway, we must decide how to handle him," you add. "I was hoping you could help me." Sir Cedric sips his tea for a moment. He clearly didn't hear you. Doesn't have his hearing aid in. He nibbles at a biscuit. Is he a mouse? One of those biscotti that they serve on the plane? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Maybe. It's. Yeah,
Wah, wah.
It's quite possible that there is a virus in his operating system, or perhaps a flaw in one of his basic directives, he says. One of them is to maximize work output, you know. That may be all he's trying to do, logging those extra hours of work. That's how the paperclip maximizer starts, all right? Come on. He softly chuckles. That's not creepy. Yes, but why wouldn't he tell us? Turn to page 67.
Oh my God.
No choice. Turn to page 38.
What?
Yeah. Just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Okay, just give us a choice. Just
Hold on.
with no context,
Turn
give
to
us a
page
choice.
85. Turn to page 29. Okay, he's teaching us all about the computer. We didn't know about. What the hell? Wait, sorry, I didn't say that. Where were we? There's no choice.
We were in England. Now we're in confusion.
You get nothing but static. You give up and call Tony Sullivan at the Federation Center in New York. More static, but at last you hear a crackling voice on the line. Tony? Chief, we've been trying to reach you for hours. What's up, Tony? Nothing is up. Everything's down. Acorn is taking complete control of the moon. His robots have shut down the docking station. They're holding the crew hostage. He has even infected the Earth supernet. You ask for more details, but the phone suddenly goes dead. You rush back into the study and find Sir Cedric sound asleep in his chair, contented smile on his face, with biscuit crumbs all over it. You move to waken him, but then think, what's the use? A computer takeover has begun, and you have a suspicion he started it. The end.
Yay, thank you for coming. No choice, we're dead. This is done. Yay.
So you go to England and that's it?
Zero choice.
There are a lot more pages here. I don't know what's supposed to happen.
So Sir Cedric started the revolution?
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm old and I'm going to be dead. Might as well take everybody with me.
I like page 4 better. That was a better. You
that's
an oxygen canister by the door. That's like a smoke. That's like a checkout oxygen canister.
Let's just start at a random page that has choices on it. Here.
59.
He interrupts your musings. We don't know what the musings are. You have two choices, Chief. Battle with me and die, or surrender, in which case I am prepared to provide a high place for you in the new order. The Computer Empire. That's a lame name.
Do we know who he's talking to? Is it
No,
Acorn?
We just jumped to a random page. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Talking eggplant or something.
Surrender to a computer for a place in the Empire? If you tell Acorn that you won't give in, turn to page 51. If you pretend you'll surrender, turn to page 64. If you try to find out more about what Acorn's up to, turn to page 42.
Find out more.
No. Surrender.
It says if you pretend to surrender. You can
We
tell
know-
Acorn that you won't give in.
We know what's in your heart.
You pretend. You want to surrender? You want to pretend to surrender. Okay.
160.
Yeah, he only went. They only went to like 185 or something. I thought maybe by then they'd like really have it dialed in.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, we pretended to surrender. What sort of reward will I have if I surrender, you ask? Blah, blah, blah. Go on to the next page.
What's the reward?
Let's see. Oh, well, the reward was the things human like so much. A fine house,
Sorry.
swimming pool, expensive cars. That's what you want, isn't it? Sure, sounds good. Okay, that's a good human, he replies.
Jeez.
You can be the chief human in the world. Okay.
How does this get 4.21 on?
Yeah.
19 ratings,
Okay,
though.
but it's up to you. But one more thing, I do require that you give me the master directive codes for the
Nostalgia.
MC3000. I want to make sure of her cooperation. I don't have the codes, Acorn. You're telling the truth. The codes required to change the master directives, you don't have. Whatever. I'd have to go to Earth. Turn to page 84.
You know, none of us are paying attention either. So
Yeah, yeah. Turn to page 13.
I just read these books over and over again. Wow.
Go to next page.
Yeah.
Wait, that's one of the reviews?
This one doesn't actually have an instruction, but I'll assume it goes to the next page. Then page 58,
Oh, sorry. Trying to stop blinding you.
26,
No, I
Next
did not
page.
read Moretsky's Choose Your Own Adventure.
111. There seriously has not been a choice in any of this. 111. I have a choice.
Uh-huh. There was one Choose Your Own Adventure, I don't know which one, where the only way to like really win was to cheat and just to jump to the middle of the book. And it was just like, you're a person who doesn't follow the rules, and sometimes in life that gets rewarded. You win.
I do remember Patrick saying that, at least from the beginning, he always wanted to reward exploring and taking risks over taking it easy. So in a Patrick book, if you sat around and read newspapers that have explored the cave, you'd die. But the other ones prefer to do things like, well, you go back to read your newspaper, but it's interrupted by adventure.
I had read, when I was a kid, I had read Space and Beyond, which was one of the Choose Your Own Adventures, and I decided to try to do it as a computer program on my Atari, or not it was something like that. So I started a program, it was called Mission KS50, KS being my initials, it was sneaky. And, but I didn't like plan it out ahead of time, so it was just like, it quickly, there's all these choices, and it quickly became this, unmanageable spider of choices.
Oh yeah.
R.A. Montgomery.
There was an article, and there was the comments about, sad piece of my childhood is gone, comment kind of like, then I told him not to turn to page 74.
So I had the Dungeons and Dragons Choose Your Own Adventure. I forget what they were called, like Journey Quest or something. And the very first page as you open it is an example of the kinds of choices you're going to be seeing in the book. It gives you a scenario and it says, choose this page or this page. And I was like 6 years old or 7 years old, and I didn't realize that that was just an example. I thought that's where the book started because it's page 1. And so I would read from that point, and I would choose one of those choices. And I didn't know who the characters were. I didn't know why they were in this castle. I thought it was like in media res, when you joined the story in the middle of the action. And so I would end up only getting to read half the book because I was coming in half the story and missing all the choices that got me to that point. And it was probably like a year or two before I figured it out. I was like, I started flipping through the book. I'm like, how do I get to all these other pages, all these choices that actually tell me who the characters are? Are these like flashbacks or something? I was like, oh, the book actually starts on page 3. It was not designed with a child in mind. Dennis?
My older brother had a similar experience reading a book that had 8 chapters, because the textbooks we had in school, they were all different stories. So he looked at the chapter names and said, okay, that one is interesting, I'll read that one first. Okay, I'll read that one next, I'll read that one next. And ended up reading the book all out of order because he didn't realize, he started putting together later, it's like, well, they're talking about something that hasn't happened yet, or they were talking about something that, I didn't know anything about that, and then, wait, they're talking about what they were talking, they're doing what they were talking about,
Yep.
You mean you're supposed to be naming the word? Why didn't
So-
you tell me this?
So thinking that the named chapters were individual books and then reading them out of order.
Like individual, it's a collection of short stories.
I had that experience with an audiobook. Turned out the iPod was on shuffle.
I did that sometimes with, I've done that one time with an audiobook where the chapters were named instead of numbered. And by default, it was sorted alphabetically.
Oh no.
So instead of chapter 01, chapter 02, or whatever, it was a night. I don't remember the words of it, but
Yeah.
it was in alphabetical
All the
order,
A's
so
first,
numeric
and
order,
yeah.
So it's like it jumped right into the book. It's like, oh, this is great. It's right into the book, and then the next chapter came out. This makes no sense at all. And then I realized that it was in alpha order.
Then you come to the chapter where it's explaining who the characters are.
I feel like these books were unfamiliar to many of my third grade classmates because they'd see me reading page 106 and then I'd be on page 34 and then 77. And they were so confused, like, why are you reading the book out of order? I think one of may have even tried to tell the teacher on me, like, Ken's cheating at reading. And I was like, get a frickin' library card, for Pete's sake.
I remember these things being kind of for people who for kids who didn't want to read. They were a good way to get them to read.
Yeah. They had a whole nother series for like beginning readers. There's like, besides Choose Your Own Adventure, there's like 10 more other series that are Choose Your Own Early Adventure, Choose Your Own Adventure for bigger kids, and some of them are for low readers or new readers.
Do we all feel like this was an adventure? This panel, I mean.
It was an adventure.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
choose to be on it?
I did.
Yeah.
Willingly.
However, I do think some of these adventures, this is going to sound stupid, set unrealistic expectations for children. I know that being a computer expert and flying to the moon is not going to happen, but there was one Choose Your Adventure, is like Adventure in Washington Square was one of the TSR Choose Your Own Adventures. And you're this, 7th grade kid solving a mystery, but instead of like, you don't have friends at school, so instead you hang out with all the homeless people down in Washington Square. Like, there's Mary who feeds the pigeons, and there's Joe who, I don't know, it was ridiculous. I'm like, I'm not sure I should be befriending homeless people. Not to criticize them, they're people too, but maybe not when you're 12 and unsupervised. Maybe if you want to go volunteer at a soup kitchen, that would be admirable and honorable, but it would also be safe.
No, I'm good. That's good.
What's next on the schedule?
A break. A long
When? Yay!
Yay.
Next session starts at 4:15. Thank you all.
Charles Mangan is not content with the 6502 in his Apple II. He wants to run Intel 8800 code. Next, Charles Mangan will demonstrate a Altair 8800 emulator for his Apple II.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Good. Okay, so this talk is, the title of this talk is called It's Turtles All the Way Down, Emulators Emulating Emulators, now with extra emulation. So the Apple II, the reason we're all here, is a fairly well-known, let's say a solved problem as far as emulating it goes. The documentation was fairly complete. The machine was a very popular machine, so there was lots of hardware to experiment on. And as far as emulating it goes, we've got an almost perfect emulated version of the Apple II. Not so much the GS and the later ones, but the original hardware and many of the variations. The ROMs have been dumped, and all those, like I said, all those problems have been solved. And so emulating the Apple II, for instance, on Windows in AppleWin is something that's commonly done. I mean, most of us have an emulator on our laptops or on our computers at home instead of hauling around an Apple IIc everywhere we go just so we can play Choplifter or work on some code, or just, for nostalgia's sake, you fire up ProDOS and bang on it for a little bit. So this is obviously would be AppleWin running in Windows. That Windows environment could just as easily be running in a virtual machine on a Mac, for instance, because that's emulated. Windows is emulating on a Mac, and that's fine. And then if you want to go one step further, you can even emulate Mac on, say, a Linux desktop with something like Parallels. So we've got these layers of emulation lasagna here, and it's a pretty extensive stack, but it works because all those things are a well-known problem and well solved. But can we go deeper? The answer, of course, is yes. We can go deeper. Running on the Apple II is ProDOS, or DOS 3.3, or CPM if you have a Z80 card, or if you have Pascal or one of the other environments and something like that. But what came before the Apple II? What could we emulate on the Apple II with the hardware that we have available, without any extra cards, without any extra stuff? Well, what came first was this guy, the Altair 8800. I have this is an Altair Arduino, which is a modern emulator reproduction running on an Arduino with all the associated blinking lights from the front panel of an Altair. It weighs about 2 pounds, whereas the original weighs something upward of 40, and has a big metal case, and is very hard to find, and they're very fragile and whatever. So I don't have one of those. I have one of these, and normally sitting in my office blinking lights like it is now. So you get the experience of the Altair without the actual weight. So again, emulation, but this time in hardware. Pretty cool. And luckily, this week, and I've already forgotten your name. Jeff Adams brought some real hardware, a clone of the Altair called the MSI 8800. The first clone, MSI 8080, that on the inside is very similar. On the outside, it uses different switches and a little bit different front panel, but for the most part, it's an S100 computer running on an Intel 8080, and you interact with it in much the same way in the base model with switches and blinking lights. So this is pretty cool. If you want to come up after, take some pictures, talk to Jeff about it. I'm volunteering you to talk to people about this because I don't know much about it. This machine is as old as I am and preceded the Apple by a couple of years. And this, the Altair 8800, when it appeared on Popular Electronics front cover, was the inspiration for the Homebrew Computer Club to join up and learn how to build your own computer for your home. And they were all talking about Altairs and building hardware for it and running software on it. Inside the Altair 8800 is an Intel 8080 running at 2 megahertz. The Intel 8080 has, it's an 8-bit chip. It has 6 registers, 6 8-bit registers, but they can join together Voltron-like and make 16-bit registers. It also has a movable stack pointer, so its stack isn't stuck at page 1 like it would be in the 6502. It has a very different instruction set from the 6502. And like I mentioned before, it's running at 2 megahertz instead of at 1. But in essence, it's an 8-bit chip, takes 8-bit instructions, can address 8 bits worth of memory. And so I figured it would be possible to emulate this on the 6502. And I was right, because somebody did it for me. In 1979, this guy named Dan McCreary, I went looking to see if there was documentation on emulating the 8080. And I found it in the form of a program called Sim80 by Dan McCreary for the KIM-1. KIM-1 is a 6502 machine, basically a 6502 with training wheels. I actually brought one a couple of years ago and showed it here and kind of talked about the innards of it. And being that early on and being a training machine and something that people were trying to learn assembly language on and learn the basics of computers, a program that could emulate a totally different architecture on the same machine meant you didn't have to spend money on another machine to learn 8080. You could do it on your KIM-1 if you already had it. So that did pretty well as far as type in or punch in programs went on the KIM-1. And I found the source code for it on archive.org and documentation, and I set about porting it to the Apple II, but it turns out he beat me to it again. And he came out with Apple 80, published it in 1979, and the binary for this I got from Brutal Deluxe on a tape image, a cassette image, but no source and very little documentation. So I had to sort of backport or port the documentation for the KIM-1 version over to the Apple version, and the source for the KIM-1 over to the Apple version. I was able to disassemble the binary and relocate it so it ran under ProDOS, load from a floppy instead of a cassette, and was able to modify it and get it to run on the 2E, et cetera. So it wasn't just loading from a cassette on a 2+. And so I felt great about that. I was like, hey, I can run this thing, run 8080 code. It's a little weird because you have to modify your code to run at a certain address instead of being unmodified code. And this is the interface for it. And it shows you the processor status, the accumulators, the registers, the stack pointer, current program counter, the current opcode, whether there are interrupts, and it even has a debugger so it has breakpoints. That's pretty cool for something that's running Intel 8080 code on a 6502. But that's not the interface that I wanted. This is the interface that I wanted. So I wanted to make this and simulate that on the Apple II. And so being the low-res kind of guy that I am, this was the result. And so you see the array of lights, the array of switches, and the great big logo telling you what it is. And that's the interface for the what I called Sim 8800, which is Dan McCreary's Apple 80. There's Sim 80 on the KIM-1, Apple 80 on the Apple II, now Sim 8800, which gives you an interactive, and as you punch in the letters, or the hex code 0 through F, it'll actually activate the switches here. And then when you click run, the little run switch will go. So it's animated, the lights light up just like it would on a real Altair, so a great simulator of an Altair in low res on your screen. I was stoked. And then I started wondering what else I could do. So there's Apple 80, the basis, and then there's the virtual Altair sitting on top of it, and it has about 4K of RAM, because that's what the original Altair had when it came from the factory into your hot hands, whether you assembled it yourself or bought it pre-assembled. 4K, Intel 8080. But again, can we go deeper? The answer is, of course, yes. But to do that, we would need some way to get stuff into the Altair and out of it, other than just blinking lights on the screen, because as cool as that is, you want to be able to type. You want to be able to do stuff as if you were sitting at a terminal instead of flipping switches, because even when you've got the shortcut of typing it in on your keyboard, it can get a little tedious. So from there, I built in 6502 a virtual SIO card, which is a serial I/O card from Altair. Very basic serial interface. I didn't have to worry about baud rates and high bits and low bits and things like that, because I was talking to the Apple and basically taking whatever character it spit out from the Altair and putting it on the screen. So the virtual serial interface, the Altair thinks it's talking to a serial board on port 0, and it sends a character out. Normally the board would do all the manipulation to turn it into serial pulses to go down a line, on a phone line, or what have you. But instead, the Apple takes it and says, that's a character, I'm going to put it on the screen. And with that and 4K, I was able to get Bill Gates and Paul Allen's BASIC for the Altair running in the virtual Altair. So 4K of RAM, virtual Altair, BASIC as you would get it on a paper tape, loaded into RAM or in a ROM, and you can run it, put in commands, very rudimentary BASIC, and there's some pretty well-known bugs and limitations to it. But as you did it, you could see the lights blink, and you could flip the switches, and oh, it was so amazing. But I was stuck with 4K, and I've got all of this space, this great big chunk of contiguous space in the Apple II's 64K memory space. And I was hanging out down here, running up against the high-res page. Not that I was using anything in high-res, but I was limiting myself there because I was loading in from ProDOS and didn't want to mess with anything with the loader that I'd written. So it was all kind of stuck down here with 4K. But with 36K to play with, I was able to get the virtual Altair with its new virtual I/O running with 32K. So 32K on an Altair back in the day would have been a lot. That's a couple of big boards that you jammed in, that you paid really good money for, and the chips would come off, and we even had trouble with the one coming up from upstairs to downstairs. We had one of the boards on Jeff's machine came loose, and it was failing its RAM test. So that's more like what the hobbyist would have. He would have a serial board talking to a terminal or a teletype, and 4K would be very limiting, so 32K, kind of reasonable, and again, it fits in that 36-ish space on the Apple II in that memory map. But he also usually would have floppy drive, because you got to get stuff onto it. And into the teletype would be great, typing things in, doing a bootloader every time, load that paper tape, that's boring. You want to have a 8-inch floppy drive to load your data in. So I wrote a little module that does that. It reads a 300 and some odd K file off of a ProDOS hard drive a few blocks at a time into memory, and pretends that it's the interface, this DC-DD card on the Altair. So the Altair could now load things in from disk. And so we have this little tiny buffer for ProDOS that's loading stuff in from the disk image, the ProDOS hard drive image. Too many layers of emulation already. And it has a little buffer here That goes into this virtual disk buffer for the Altair, and that's 4K. That's basically one whole track, or one whole, is it a whole track? Yeah. Of the 8-inch floppy. There's the code for SIM8800, and then there's the 32K of RAM. And then there's a little bit down here that's reserved, and a little bit up here that's reserved. And I've basically chock full, and a little tiny slice that's free for future expansion. So I've got the 32K, I've got the 36K of memory pretty chock full at this point. And I can run really cool demos. I can run later versions of BASIC that needed 24K or 16K of RAM. And I wanted more. So having never messed around much with higher memory space than 64K, I had to learn a little bit about page flipping when it came to extended RAM versus onboard RAM, and whether or not I could do what I wanted kind of depended on how contiguous the space was. So I had to pretend that I had 0000 to FFFF for the Altair to address, so that I didn't have to tell the Altair to do its own page flipping, because that was a whole other thing on the 8080. Because you could, but I didn't want to get there just yet. So on the Apple side, I sorted out how to copy my code and the buffers into both the high and low memory spaces. And this is the first 32K of Altair RAM, and this is the second 32K of Altair RAM. And so between the two, I have 64K of RAM in the virtual Altair. And so now it can run CPM. What? 48K version of CPM. This one's from Lifeboat Associates. It's a sort of an offshoot of the original one. But in the end, you can load in emulation, running the exact same code that you would get on your 8-inch floppy for your Altair, in emulation on your Apple II. So CPM on the Apple II without a Z80 card. And that's pretty cool. Because in CPM, you can run CPM basic. And you can run your own programs. So we've got an interpreted language of BASIC running on CPM, which is an operating system running on an emulated hardware running on the Apple II. And the answer is yes, we can go deeper, because with 64K of RAM and CPM and a 330K 8-inch floppy disk and a serial input, we can run Zork. So Zork on CPM and Zork on any of its platforms is running a Z machine, which is basically a virtual computer that they run Z code on, and you're typing commands into it to run Z code on a virtual machine in CPM, which is an operating system running on an emulated machine, in 64K of RAM on a machine that only has 64K of RAM to begin with, emulating a 2 megahertz processor on a 1 megahertz processor with only 2 registers, making up for the fact that it doesn't have 6 registers. And I think we've completed our emulation lasagna now. So we've sprinkled the cheese on top. And the source for all of this is on GitHub, on my GitHub at option8/sim8800. And it really is turtles all the way down. Because it's amazingly slow. Just the idea of running the 8080 code on the 6502 without any of the other emulation layers on top of it and any of the other code and stuff that you're doing, it takes about 300 cycles of 6502, and that's in pretty tight loops and code. Because I haven't handed this off to the experts yet, but I'm sure that they will find that the original author did a really good job of optimizing the code for the Kim 1 and then for the Apple II. It still takes about 300 cycles to emulate one 2 megahertz cycle. So the only way this is really usable is in emulation, in Virtual 2 or something else where you can crank up that CPU speed. So you've got Virtual 2 running on Mac, which could be running on Windows, which could be running on Linux. Running an Apple II at 16 or 32 or however many megahertz you can crank it up to in emulation. Emulating the Altair, running CPM, and a Z machine, and running Zork. Any questions? Can you go deeper? Maybe. Because someone did mention to me this week a 6502 environment that can run on a Z80. So you could add another layer and in CPM emulate 6502, but on an emulated Z80. But it was I think he said it was a Z80, not an 8080, and there's a whole layer of complications that makes it. The architecture of the emulator is such that it's extensible. I mean, I obviously are deeper, but I haven't gotten there yet. In the back.
In that machine, it's possible to run 6502 process on that machine. You can run 8086, maybe 186, 286, and 386 in that machine, not all at the same time.
Right.
You can address 24 bits of address space in that machine. That the bus became IEEE 696, which became an industry standard. People were putting 386s in on an S100 bus before it became defunct and IBM won the game.
Right. What Jeff was pointing out is that the S100 bus, being as flexible as it is, the architecture is such that it can handle, or you can get 6502 and 8086 and up to 386 boards. Yeah, to go into the S100 bus. Luckily, I'm not emulating at that low a level to where I have to worry about the bus that it's on. I'm looking at the ports on the 8080. It has an 8-bit address that lets it essentially address 256 different peripherals. And so I've got the serial ports on 0 and 1, and then the floppy on 10 and 11 or whatever it is. But I'm not going so low level as to actually do anything on the S100 bus. So that would be another layer deeper to where you're emulating the hardware to then put a processor into it. That's well beyond my abilities. And even writing Apple 80 or Sim 80 is probably something that would have taken me more than one Kansasfest to Kansasfest duration to do. So I'm glad that I found it and I was able to do all the stuff on top of it instead of recreating that particular wheel. Because I would still be doing that, and that would be a great fun project, but I would probably be banging into a lot of limitations in my own abilities there. Any other questions?
So you said that your low-res interface to Apple 80 allows you to actually flip the switches and enter in the data.
Yes.
Can you show us a couple of those?
Sure.
Something you can work through with it, like a cassette interface?
Sure. Let me see if I can do it on here. While I'm doing that, is there any other questions from folks? I'll try not to sing. Roger Wagner kind of took the trophy on that one. Let's see here. for not singing? Yeah, okay. Let's open up the latest version in Virtual 2. There we go. All right. So if I PR number 5. All right. So this is my shell. This is my loader program before you get to the emulator. So I can choose the disk loader ROM. This is as if you're either punching in programs or loading a tape, and it kind of chooses which chunk of memory or which chunk of bytes to load into memory before it starts up the Altair. So for instance, here's, it's got micro chess, so you can play chess very slowly against a very slow mediocre player, from what I understand. He's still better than me. You can run Kill the Bit, which is what this guy's running, or you can do a couple of different versions of BASIC. So I'm going to run Kill the Bit, and then you get some instructions here. And so it's X to examine memory, 0 through F to toggle the 16 switches, X to examine memory, N for next address and previous address, just like flipping the switches on the real Altair. So you can examine and deposit memory, adjust the byte, examine and deposit, etc. So here's the basic interface for, or the low-res interface for the virtual Altair. And so what we'll do is trace, and you can see the lights blinking, and should be very similar to what you see on the Altair Arduino down there.
So how do the lights correspond to the coding registers and PCs?
This set of lights, the top row of 8, is showing you the, no, it's showing you the process counter, the PC itself. Or no, that's this. The top row of 8 is showing you the opcode that it's running. So the actual bytes at the address, which is represented here. So you'll see it, if we slow it down, you'd see it 101, 1101, and it would build up until it gets to a loop and comes back. So this is the address that it's running at. And then this is the high byte of the address. And the code that's down here in the low in memory is telling it to store or load an address into one of the registers. And that address is actually cycling through. And so you'll see this light is pulsing every time it accesses that high address. And so you see, as an output, basically, the lights going across. And so if I start hitting the switches here, you'll see the switches going up and down. And I've managed to mess up my kill the bit game already. So I've got 3 bits to kill. Oh, I got a bunch of bits to kill. So anyhow, that's how you would play Kill the Bit on this guy here. The next state that they're in.
Wait, when you flip the switch,
Mm-hmm.
what is that doing exactly?
It is. Yes, it's being read by I/O port 0 as the byte that gets sent or read by I/O port 0 on the 8080 is this byte here. These bytes, if you were in, let's see, trace, let's see, caps lock. Anyhow, if you were in the program entry mode, these bytes here, or these switches here, would indicate which byte you're putting into memory, and then also what address you're putting memory into. So I would, if I wanted to put something in at 1000, I would flip this switch up. I would flip the examine switch, and then it would show me what's currently in at 1000. Then I could put in my new byte, 101010, and put deposit, and then that set of bits would be deposited into that byte location in memory. And so all of that is doable in this interface in the same way that it was on the hardware. So you flip the switches, you hit examine, then you hit next, and you deposit, and deposit, and deposit, and you build your program that way. A few switches, and then you've got kill the bit. There we go. Any other questions? You guys are quiet. I'm not keeping you from dinner. Dinner's not for like another hour, so. Something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. It depends on which opcode it is specifically, because some opcodes take a lot of paths, but it's between 300 and 400.
Some of the 8080 opcodes are 19 cycles long. I forget what the 6502 is, like 3 or 4 or 6. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so the 8080, some of them are 19 clock cycles long. Even though it's running at 2 megahertz, 19 clock cycles.
Well, and again, some of the operations are essentially 16-bit operations because it's working on 2 registers at once, and so emulating that takes a lot of gymnastics in the 6502 code just to do it, even if it may only take 5 cycles of the Intel chip to do it, of the hardware to do it. The code takes many, many more because it has to do the gymnastics that are not extant in hardware. So if somebody wants to try this on real hardware and do a physical clock test to see how long it takes to boot CPM versus the emulator, then by all means spend your afternoon doing that. But I'm going to run it in Virtual 2 in the Command 3 mode and let it go as fast as it can. All right, anybody wants to come up and take a look at the Altair Arduino, flip some switches or whatever, that's fine. Please be mindful of the IMSI, because that is literally an antique, and I'm sure that Jeff would not like it if one of those very delicate switches were to come off in someone's hand. So those are there for you to look at, but please don't touch the IMSI. And if you want to get an Altair Arduino or other similar thing of your own, I can tell you where that is. You can order the kits, and it's real easy to solder. It's a lot of fun.
I don't know if you've seen, they just had a revision of the
I just saw it.
kit that comes in this beautiful blue box.
Yep. The one I've got is in a bamboo sort of box, but the new ones you can get in a more period accurate blue box, and I'm going to order the upgrade. So next year I'll have the one with the nice metal blue box. Let's see here. If you want, you can get it at, well, altaiarduino.com seems to work. Altair Arduino, and that takes you to Add Water and Stir. addwaterandstir.com. Yes, Addwater is his last name. Yeah, Add Water and Stir. All right, thank you.
Dinner is here in this room, 5:30. Please remember to bring your wacky ties.
Thank you.